Hello, once again, everyone. The hot topic: who is to blame for the suffering and all the problems bedeviling the nation of Zimbabwe? There are three principal players. One, it is the British, then ZANU-PF, and MDC in its all variations, representing the opposition. Those are the three responsible entities for all the problems that are bedeviling Zimbabwe. For various reasons, each one justifies its own position as the innocent one. But unfortunately, what remains and is known all around the world now is the view of the other two entities, namely the British and the opposition. They blame everything on ZANU-PF. Let me unpack it. It is not true. The British have got a history of dishonesty. When Cecil Rhodes came in, they cheated Lobengula through the right concession. They said they were only coming in here for business, for mineral exploration. But then they obtained a charter using the right concession to actually occupy the land, cheating of the highest order. So they occupied the land. By so doing, they assumed illegal ownership of the land. 1980 or 1979 precisely, Lancaster's constitution, the British say, let's not do land reform for the next 10 years, from 1980 to 1990, if we get independence. Let's do what we call a willing buyer, willing seller, as if they were going to be willing to be selling, and they were not willing. And it dragged on until 1995. And John Major promised to fulfill the Lancaster's requirements. But then he went out of office before he did it, and came Tony Blair. And Tony Blair flatly refused to compensate the white farmers, because now they consider themselves as having title to the land, which title they got by cheating and dishonesty. And now they dishonestly promise that they will be willing to compensate their kith and kin, and they refused. And that sparked the chaotic land reform. That is a major contributor. 90% of the land reform problems of 2000 emanate from that. So it is the responsibility of the British. They cheated again. The land reform chaos was a responsibility of the British. ZANU-PF, how did they contribute? They were naive to accept ISAP. They were inexperienced at independence in terms of governance. They were still learning. They believed the British in 1980. That was naive. They forgot what they did to our ancestors. So ZANU-PF takes the blame for that inexperience and naivety. The MDC, what do? They come in as a genuine opposition driven by workers because of the suffering caused by ISAP. They were also completely naive. They didn't realize the machinations of the British, and they fell for it to the extent of calling for sanctions against Zimbabwe. And those sanctions, they brought a lot of trouble for the country. They wreaked havoc. And they gave the British and the Americans a platform to tell the wider world that even inside Zimbabwe, the children of Zimbabwe agree with them that ZANU-PF is evil. So since then, since 2000, all the problems have been heaped on top of ZANU-PF, unfairly so. And all the born frees, the children were told that it is because of ZANU-PF that you are suffering. I'm here to debunk that. It is not entirely because of ZANU-PF. It is mainly because of British dishonesty. Secondly, it is because of the naivety of what was supposed to be a responsible opposition is irresponsible, and up to now with sanctions. And all they want is state power. They don't even realize the bigger picture and the greater interest from the outside world. That if Zimbabwe succeeds today, it will become an example. And many nations will follow and do land reform. So it is in the interests of the imperialists that Zimbabwe must never succeed, so that anyone who thinks about land reform will always think about the problems of Zimbabwe. And our opposition doesn't seem to realize that. We hope they were going to learn in 2008 when they entered the unity government, but they didn't. Because this division and this fighting against ZANU-PF and against the people of Zimbabwe was supposed to end with the unity government. Because we can give them the benefit of the doubt that in 2000 they were still naive and inexperienced in terms of politics. But surely by 2008 and the events of that period should have opened their eyes to realize the real things that were at stake. Alas, they didn't. Now in 2022, CCC comes and it follows exactly on the same path that Morgan Tsvangirai traveled. And as naive as ever, they still support the sanctions from outside. And they believe that it's the solution to Zimbabwe is to remove the ZANU-PF regime. What a catastrophe. What a tragedy. So the people of Zimbabwe must know the truth that their suffering is squarely at the hands of the British. The naivety of the opposition and the inexperiences and faults of ZANU-PF. So together as a group, they must find a solution. So the solution to Zimbabwe is not found by removing ZANU-PF and putting MDC in its various functions, in its various formations, because it's just as good as installing the British. They are equally responsible for this mess. And the only entity that is toiling to solve the problem is ZANU-PF, while the others are trying the best they can to make things worse and worse for the people, so that the people turn against ZANU-PF and embrace them without realizing that they are equally complicit in their struggles and sufferings. It is unfair, therefore, to lay all the blame on ZANU-PF and to try to exonerate the British and the MDC and its formations. It is unfair. So the people of Zimbabwe must rise up now and ask the British to be responsible. The Queen must denounce the Red Concession and the occupation of Zimbabwe as represented by the annexure of our territory in 1923 and the declaration of our territory as a republic in 1965, operationalized in 1970, and concretized in 1980. The people of Zimbabwe must stand up and demand accountability from the British government for the promises made at Lancaster. It doesn't matter who is in government now. Boris Johnson must pay compensation as agreed to the white farmers who had to relinquish land forcibly, although there was room for them to be allowed to stay on the land if they had cooperated. The people of Zimbabwe must never be fooled by the CCC as a formation of the MDC to pretend to be holy. Their hands are dripping with blood because of the suffering of the people in hospitals. Some are prostitutes today because of economic challenges brought about the irresponsible behavior of them calling for sanctions and maintaining them even after the inclusive government. That is unforgivable. The sanctions were supposed to die in the inclusive government, but they remained an irresponsible opposition until to this day. And it's time for the people of Zimbabwe to stand up now and hold them accountable for their suffering, together with the British, together with ZANU-PF, for the things that they didn't do right. But it is the three entities' responsibility, and all of them must come together to solve this problem, not to denigrate and demonize ZANU-PF alone. I thank you.